with knowing that we're going through these various different cyclic changes and that things are probably going to get very, very bad in the sense of weather on this planet moving forth as we go into this higher energy structure within the galactic cycle. And we're going to have massive changes here on the planet, especially with extreme weather, so on and so forth. Then how do we perceive the globalists who are trying to potentially depopulate the world, concentralize human population into these cities, and then leave nature off limits? I mean, it almost is like that they understand what's happened, which we know that they do, but what they're trying to do is actually kind of in a sick, demented way is save humanity by basically trying to get them in these areas, these centralized 15-minute cities, and trying to not change too much of their way of life.
Are we preparing ourselves, like David said earlier, because we prepared ourselves at all, we're millions of miles ahead of everybody else. So that means that we will be the next to perpetuate everything here.
Well, I'm looking at it as keeping compliant breeding stock for the next 80% that they need in the cities.
Good evening. Welcome to American Media Periscope's AMP After Hours, live with you every Tuesday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And just so everybody knows, this is the last week of AMP After Hours. Next week, this transitions to The Fringe, which will be 5 days a week. And tonight, we're going to be talking about, oh my goodness, some great topics here. We're going to be talking about exposing the Great Reset. We're going to be talking about the BRICS nations, the global digital currency that is coming, the CBDCs. We're going to be talking about, I believe, the unified ledger that the Bank of International Settlements just put out, and how to survive and navigate the coming global transition. We have David DuByne on with us tonight, and cycles through history that affect food production. And that's one of the biggest things that we talk about here on AMP News, as well as the Red Pill Project, is the various cycles that dominate our world and how that is being exploited and utilized for this new global transition into what I call the digital slave matrix. Dave, what's up, man? We also have Jim Price here too. Can't forget Jim Price. Hello. Hello. David, how we doing tonight, man?
Yeah, doing well. Just trying to stay on top of these. Yeah, we're in the cycle. The food prices keep rising, and that's always one of the things you get is the massive inflation that tips into people migrating, overthrowing governments, and then the main cause is food. And if I could just interject and say that without food, you don't have a civilization. So, I mean, you could talk to your blue in the face about, interest rate this or global trade that. It really is the most basic, simple equation. If you don't have enough food for the people, it won't work. No food, no civilization, but you need to give it to them at an affordable price so they can continue to do other things like spend money on, I don't know, anything that will keep your economy moving. But we're in that people can barely afford food. So I'm just curious what y'all think, how people are going to start to behave now, because I think we've tipped over the point where people are going to stop being cordial toward one another or businesses. I think we're heading that direction already.
Well, I've talked about this for some time. Since November 2020, I talked about what I call the firestorm event that was going to come, and it's going to start sequentially happening, and it's going to get speed up faster and faster and faster. This is going to result in the attacks on supply chain and infrastructure, and we've seen that over the last 2 years. But on top of that, the global transition that's happening right now between the BRICS nations and the Western Global Alliance, I think is paramount, because one of the things that China and Russia do in our specific is they're going into Northern Africa. They're going into Central America and South America. They're redeveloping roads and infrastructure. They're investing in the people, and they're bringing their corporations in, but they're also exchanging out the global trade dynamic of the United States of America and the other Western nations. This would be corn, wheat, soy, livestock, and bringing it to these other nations to basically create a supplemental or parallel system that operates against the Western global order, if we want to look at it like that.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, ITM Trading is a precious metals company that has been in business for over 27 plus years with a mission to educate and empower individuals to hedge against inflation, mitigate financial risk, and prepare for the Great Reset. ITM Trading has spent the more than 27 years developing a team of expert researchers and gold and silver analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call. Dial the digits 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422.
And now on with the video.
The United States is going to fall off the cliff in the sense of this production. We're also seeing this from our own government. I mean, Joe Biden just reduced energy production by 50%. We've seen the attacks throughout our infrastructure for the last few years. We have this radical weather that's going on, which you and I both know, and Jim knows, is not a coincidence, that is destroying the crops. I mean, we have these massive heat waves that are coming over. We have the hurricanes, the tornadoes, everything else. So I agree with you. I think that food and water wars are what are next on the agenda.
Well, the sad part of it, I think a lot of it is cyclical, but they're only taking advantage of those cycles. When we go into these things, it's not so much that it's like, well, we are the only ones that are noticing, or we're the only ones that have the research. They're the ones that hid this research from us, and we're the dummies that have found it. I think, honestly, there's a lot of this that's been so hidden from us for so long. I really, at this point, I'm putting everything on the table. There's only about one or two topics I'm pretty solid on. I won't move. But at this point, there's a lot of things out there that we have to rethink, because these people know these cycles come. They know they exist. They understand the solar cycles. They know what a solar flare is. They're not, dumb. They're just, they just are taking advantage of it. They have a business plan that shows that they'll maintain their hierarchy going into the transition, while a lot of us are going to be treading water, or hopefully a lot of us are getting ahead of it because we are talking about it now and making sure that we have this constant conversation, that we don't fall behind.
Yeah, we're not going to tread water. We're getting in the speedboat.
Yeah. Oh, I'm ready, man. Let's do this.
Yeah, seriously. It's about, and even if you get a little bit prepared for these changes, you're going to be miles ahead of everybody else. Because I still look around and, talk to people, and I know a lot of people write me messages and say, I can't believe I talked to like 10 people this weekend and only maybe 2 thought there was something wrong at the moment. Or
yeah,
that makes no sense to me after these last 3 or 4 years, how people could still sit here and just say, oh, whatever, everything's fine. I'll go back to my, whatever, football, Netflix, whatever you want to do.
Right. Well, isn't that though the same idea that the research has shown that, what is it, there's only like 20 to 30% of the people that are actually what they consider to be aware or making cognitive decisions. The rest of everybody else is just doing reactionary programming that they've done since birth, that you do this, this happens, you do this, that happens, this, do this. And they're just a monkey hitting the red button, waiting for a pellet, right? And the sad part is they will get caught up in this machine. And that's a lot of people. And I'm using a number that I think is very generous to say that there's only 80%. I think it's a higher number than that. But the sad part of it is that those that we can wake up, I want to make sure that we all can remember that even though we see someone who may be unaware, everybody's worth saving. Everybody's worth putting energy into. Everybody is worth looking at. Well, we have to think of ourselves as ones that we don't want to drown ourselves with them. We're lifeguards. We want to go save who we can. And there's those that are willing to participate in that, and understanding that, hey, there is something going on here, whether you believe it's a plan or not. It doesn't matter. There is something happening in our cycles of our earth. So please look at that and make sure that you're just just try, and then you'll stumble onto some other things. But at the bare minimum, if you don't believe that all this economic stuff is, going to happen, and you don't believe there's going to reset you for the CBDCs, that's fine. But at least act like that the food's not going to be as plentiful as you hoped it would be. Get a little resourceful for yourself. I don't know. I see it. I know that's been like this all my life, and I don't know why we act like this is the first year we had a cycle. That just really blows my mind on that. Anyway.
Well, to dovetail into that big old yellow thing off to the left there that you see every day in the sky, if you really don't want to look at anything happening on our planet, please do the research into how these cycles of low and high solar activity are really responsible for the crop losses. And you'll start to see this ebb and flow of civilization apex, civilization decline, civilization apex, civilization decline. And it's on a mappable cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
They're all aware of that. Remember all the stuff they've hidden from us. I mean, think about just, we'll go into the Incan temple stuff that they've had there that they've known about all this time. They've known about the Chinese temples and the Chinese pyramids, and they know about the ones in Japan. They know about all the stuff that they've been hiding from us. They're well aware of exactly how this cycle works and exactly what dates it's going to happen. We're the ones that are having to struggle through all the muddy water to try to figure out what's really going on most of the time. And that's where we got to be better at.
Well, and one interesting thing that I've talked about is that this is a coinciding El Nino system that is operating within a solar maximum. And that's very important to remember, because historically, when we look at this is when we have these drastic shifts within weather. We have very hot summers and very, very cold, massive, crappy winters. The last time I remember in the 1990s in upstate New York, we had some of the coldest winters on record. We had record snowfall, feet upon feet of snowfall, and there was perma-ice everywhere. And this is the type of weather patterns that come in with these solar maximum cycles as well as the El Nino cycles. And these are dominated by higher galactic cycles with cosmic bombardment coming in and then solar radiation going out. Those two basically fight within this 11-year cycle, solar minimums and solar maximums. And this is what produces all the variations of weather that we have on this planet. And people need to understand this. I think there was, and David, maybe you know about this, the 2004 NASA report specifically on the effects of the sun's solar maximums and minimums on the weather on the various other planets in our solar systems, which that article was removed, but they just recently republished one pertaining to Uranus, that the weather patterns are matching specific various solar maximum and minimum patterns, which is baffling scientists. I'm like, how is this baffling them? We've known about this for hundreds of years.
Yeah. Wait, can I go for the lowest lying fruit or the lowest hanging fruit there? Like the media comes out and straight up tells you that the El Nino is responsible for driving these higher temperatures. But remember, we came off of 3 La Ninas in a row, and they were pointing to it. Oh, it takes global temperatures down, but the heat will be back. Right there, they're admitting it's a natural cycle that drives the heating and the cooling on the planet. Yet they say that with a straight face. They give you the science, El Nino, La Nina, but 2 seconds later, they're telling you because you're driving an SUV or a car or, want to fly or something that you need to, excuse me on that you need to, pay global taxes with no accountability. That you can't change anything with that money.
Can we just stop doing the cons? Can we stop buying timeshares? I feel like we're just in like this perpetual Groundhog's Day of buying a timeshare with a maintenance fee, and everything's a new cost, a new tax, a new whatever. Guys, I believe that we honestly are at over 100% tax in America already. I just think we're too stupid to figure it out. That's why the financial system doesn't work, is because we're so burdened with everything we do. Tell me one product that isn't beat to death before it ever gets to the consumer. Think about oil. How many times the government touches oil?
The sheep or the chickens that I raise on my own farm, where I get those eggs before they get washed, coated, smashed, and all the natural goodness taken out of them, and then it shortens your shelf life on that product. Yeah. Just little answer there.
I started putting the baby starter, the chick starter, in with my regular feed, and now my eggs are a third bigger. Like I'm
chick starter, really?
Yeah, I put chick starter in there, and it's basically the same price per pound, but the chick starter in with the grain, mixing it in. They don't fit in the carton now. Like I have to almost smash the carton over the eggs to get it in there. So if you're doing chickens and all that, the higher the protein, they're obviously better. And by the way, chickens eat meat. If you put a chicken out there, they'll eat a chicken. If you put pork chops out there, they'll eat the pork chop, and they'll eat it to the bone is gone, like almost gone. Like they'll eat everything but the white.
Velociraptors.
Oh, they are. And they're
turkeys, and you'll see a velociraptor.
Oh, now, yeah, turkeys are little. No, those are little pricks. Those are not good. Ooh, they make chickens look like you're not even doing anything. Yeah.
So, and maybe we can talk about that here in a bit, is the importance of homesteading, the importance of self-production and self-reliance. because I think that that is crucial in this world right now, even though that we're coming into probably one of the most technologically advanced societies that we can remember on the history books, that we're going to be downgraded. And I always envision Star Wars Episode 4, where Luke is growing up on Tatooine and the uncle lives on this farm in the middle of nowhere, and everything is very, very archaic and old and worn down, and they're living off of the land. And I kind of see that in this post-modern world that we're moving into, especially with the global elite and how they're operating. But David, tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing specifically with the movements that are happening in this chaotic world right now, and what we have potentially coming in the next 3 to 6 months.
Well, you hit it on the head there. The Bank for International Settlements moving over to a distributed ledger for settlement. It seems a lot of the research that I've done on it looks like RippleNet is going to be the on-demand liquidity protocol that they're going to use, which then will involve the XRP token. Now, they're going to have to go to global settlement something, because you can't, or governments can't just start flipping a bunch of Bitcoins around. So they're going to have to come back to something that can be audited as we understand modern accounting. So if it is on a ledger, quote unquote, then that can be zeroed out, and you can program in. Do you want to zero every hour? Do you want to balance that every day? Do you want to balance it every minute? And at that point, if something were to happen, like we're having lockups and all the money these days, seems like globally, just interest rates are going this way, that way, and there's a lot of collapse happening at the same time. Well, they could target and inject liquidity into something just on the ledger. Hyperledger will be used as part of that. Quant as well, which should be the base layers that everything else will run off of. You might see Stellar in there with Digibyte. XDN would be another one. But it seems like the ecosystem that's forming around the central bank digital currencies and all these sovereign nations trying to issue off of that. See, they're so divided. You got hundreds of nations that are trying to, develop their own protocols to roll out these CBDCs, but there's something that's already built specifically for them. When the XRP was created, and actually the RippleNet system was developed for central banking to do all this liquidity swaps between. You could swap between a bank to a bank, which was the overnight repo crisis, which really crashed markets in 2019. And we needed the never-ending money printing, which followed during COVID. That saved the system. Like, that system was broken where banks didn't trust banks. And remember also in 2019, time machine, here's 2 quarters, we're going to go back. How many central bank protests around the world were going on in 2019 at the end of it? I do recall more than 20. And it was growing every day. They really were pointing the finger at the monster, saying, hey, central banks are responsible for, the degradation of our lifestyle and life qualities and our family life. And, those protests were growing day by day, but that was a twofer. With COVID, they got to knock down all of the protests. They stopped instantly. And then it gave them unlimited money printing capabilities. So
a quick question here, guys. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe I'm late to the table here, the trough, or what do you want to call it? But basically, we funded the banks to transfer our money over to crypto and funded their upstarts so that they could come in and then run us with the same crypto we early funded. Did we just crowdfund the new banking with Bitcoin and all these different things that we dumped our cash into? I mean, and now they're part of the banking system as well. I mean, it shows that this was the plan all along. So were we the Kickstarters that kickstarted the new? I mean, is that
well, not necessarily, because a lot of the money that was inflow, the hundreds of trillions of dollars of liquidity that was flowing in from the U.S. central bank into the markets, this was basically being utilized as another aspect of a wealth transfer system. And this is kind of what I see as Klaus Schwab's perspective of you will own nothing and you will like it, is that we're in the progress of another wealth transfer from the people of the United States, from the wealthy people, from the middle class, into the hands of the globalist rich elite. And this is why we're seeing a lot of just destruction of various property and land around our country, as well as the pending collapse of the commercial and residential real estate markets. Going into what David's saying here is you have the unified ledger, which was proposed by the Bank of International Settlements, And this calls for a multi-diversified, dynamic centralized cryptocurrency system to where countries could have their individualized own CBDC as well as privatized cryptocurrencies that integrate into a larger global system that facilitate global interexchange. And then facilitates those transactions instantaneously instead of having 3 to 5 days for settlement through various different clearinghouses and so forth. XRP, which is one of the top contenders in the ledger field, they're under a lawsuit. We just had that ruling the other day, but they have something known as XRPL. XRPL, the XRP ledger, is consulted with multiple governments around the world, specifically in Europe and Africa, on the utilization of their ledger as the integration for that private back channel as well as their governmental back channel into that unified ledger technology, which would mean that XRP token would be utilized for the clearance of those transactions, the clearing of those transactions for those specific countries. And this also kind of coordinates in with the ISO 220 requirements that were just brought about this last year. Another one that you mentioned was Quant, and this is a big one. It's trading a little under $100. I think it may be up over $100 after Bitcoin's little run we just had there. And Quant is going to be a major player in this. And a lot of these coins that we're talking about here that are the ISO 220 certified, you're going to potentially see them move up to the high side into the top 10 of the cryptocurrencies, while a lot of these other projects fall away because they were nothing but rug pulls and scams. But cryptocurrency or blockchain technology is the technology of the future financial system. And we have to understand that there is a new development of what they're doing in the sense of global infrastructure, the integration of these 5G, 6G networks moving into the 10G networks that basically establish what a lot of people talk about. And I think a lot of people talk about this differently, is the quantum financial system. Really what this is a backend that Donald Trump established through quantum.gov, where he put up $500,000 to various different cities around the country to start developing a quantum infrastructure. And basically what this means is a high bandwidth infrastructure that could be integrated with new technologies as they come around that increase the speed of transference of data transactions, as well as talking about different types of technologies that were developed by various different Livermore National Laboratories and so forth, utilizing quantum entanglement. We're probably about 10 to 15 years away from that type of infrastructure, but they want to start building it now. And then you utilize cryptocurrency into those types of systems, and you have this impenetrable system of this monetary system, but also this system, since it's centralized, has another level of control over your life in the sense of how the money is utilized. And this is why I'm a proponent of parallel economic systems, decentralized economic systems that we need to start building up now. David, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I wanted to try to run into Jim's thought there of crowdfunding everything into what we understand as blockchain. In the early days of the coins, most people started to get on it if you were looking at it around 2016, 17. But what was built into almost every single blockchain protocol, how many decimal points you can go down. So if you're going to work on an ICO, you can do 12 decimal points down. But it seems like the standard protocol, which is now going to be CBDCs, is going to be 18 down. So what I've been reading about is they're going to try to arbitrage, because think about a US dollar right now. How many decimal points do we go down on a US dollar? 2. You got one. Yeah, you got $1.04. You got $1.25. We're going 2 zeros down. So when I'm talking about that, it's your 1 or a 2 or whatever digit it is in front, point, right. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 18, 1. You're going down that deep into 18 digits past that dot. So in the US dollar, currently we're using 2. So every single blockchain protocol is going 18 decimal places. So that means 18 zeros behind your 1, for example. So I've already been reading how they're trying to arbitrage. So the 18th decimal deep loan rate, either seconds, minutes, microseconds, hours, days, weeks, compared to like a 6-0 digit down. If you're going to go 6 decimal places on an arbitrage on 18 decimal places, because it seems that the interest rates are going to be different based on each individual zero that you're going down, or how many, how far down that chain you're going, all the way to the 18th position or into the 10th position or 6th. There's going to be different rates, and they're already talking on how to arbitrage this. So think about if you could scrape 1/100,000th of a cent off of every transaction that's moving across the planet when you got quadrillions of dollars settling on this ledger every single week. Like what kind of scraping of confiscation is that? So Jim, I thought it really kind of fit into what you just said there.
Like the house pulling back on the poker table. Nobody thinks about the house is always.
They're taking a rake. They're taking the rake.
And that's
off the table, every hand.
Over Visa, MasterCard transactions now. It's a little sloppier, but that's, all they're getting is more clever, right? If we fixed all the election issues today, there's going to be someone tomorrow trying to find their way back in it, right? So that's always this is them just reinventing or going even deeper, I guess. Obviously, 2 digits wasn't enough. Now we're doing 18.
Well, and it goes to what David was saying there, is that it allows for a high level of arbitrage at various different points and levels. And what this does is this makes basically the trading of money very, very more profitable for the money traders. And when you control the systems and you have advanced AIs who can sit there and run, millionth of a second arbitrage programs and make, billionths of a penny every microsecond, that adds up over time. And that's one way that they will embezzle the money out of the system and make everybody else poor, that you're not able to take part in because you don't have the tools of the technology. There's another aspect of this.
Well, you need to write your own algorithm into that. That's a really interesting concept there. I was thinking about how to take advantage of that too, to do something good with the money to help other people and get our local communities ready for these changes, Right. So with ChatGPT or a few others that are out there, I'm sure there's a way to, jump in those arbitrage opportunity itself. If it's out there, it's no different than trading the stock market. It's no different than buying gold or silver, hoping it goes up, a stock, hope it goes up, a bond, whatever from the government for 7% or something. No different. It's just another monetary instrument out there that some way you can get it. And that's the whole thing. Never be greedy. Follow your passion and always use that money to make people around you or your community a better place to live. If you get into the greed, forget it. This conversation is not for you.
Yeah.
If you want to do something positive with the money to help other people, then please continue listening.
Yeah. And, one thing that I've always talked about is Sir John Templeton. Sir John Templeton, after World War II, came back. He was an American soldier, British American soldier, came back, had $10,000, equivalent to about $100,000 in today's money, to his name. He got it through inheritance and through the money he saved up in the military. He bought every stock after he came back from World War II, every blue chip trading under $1. Within 10 years, he was a multi-millionaire worth hundreds of millions of dollars by investing everything that he earned into the stock market, and then ended up going and funding Silicon Valley and then getting invested in the China, became a multi-billionaire. You have Temple University, which is from him. And he said that you make the most money, the most opportunity comes about in the times of greatest pessimism. And right now we're in an opportunity of massive pessimism in this country and in this world, where there is a massive amount of opportunity to gain wealth. As much as people think that it's the opposite of what's happening, there's tons of opportunity right now. You just have to be aligned with the current trends that are changing and transforming the economic landscape. And blockchain technology is absolutely one of them. And I'm one of those fighting for digital sovereignty and fighting for decentralized parallel systems, parallel economic systems, because I think that those are truly the heart at what's going to save a lot of us. And the unified ledger that was just introduced by the BIS, this actually allows for that private cryptocurrencies to be integrated into the unified ledger, as long as that their settlements are within CBDCs. They really don't give a crap.
I think I'm gonna go plant some more trees.
There you go. Go plant some more trees.
I just
fruit tree, so you can create alcohol out of that.
I'm not trying to. Yeah. I got. But no, I'm just like, it makes me. And this is a statement I've made on my show and on other shows as well as yours, Josh. Is I think we need to go and understand the 1880s, and when we just started the industrial age, but also still had our connection with like we're talking about tonight, everything we're talking about, the cyclical things of things, the money of things, but also just the self-reliance of things, and trying to pull yourself out of where your reliance is in the financial system for your next cheeseburger. Well, why don't you find a way to make your own biosphere effect for yourself to be able to create your own future, so you don't have to rely on that broken system that's going to eat a lot of people alive.
Yeah.
And I know now you can work on a lot of that stuff, don't you, DuByne? You got a lot of that stuff going, don't you? You're doing like heirloom seeds and a bunch of stuff. Weren't you talking about doing that? You're buying them.
Yeah. We are. We have 3 different gardens out at the house now, and I have turkeys, geese, ducks, and chickens. Now, we did have sheep, but we traded them back. So I bought them from the Amish. I fattened them up, and then sold 2 to my neighbor, and then the Amish took the one that we'd fattened up. We added about 80 pounds, almost 100 pounds to it from when it was a calf, or a lamb, excuse me, and then sent it back. The reason I was thinking about calves is, and then, because I'm not going to eat my own animal that I raised, because it really was fun to play with it. It was great. There's no way in my heart I could slaughter that, but I could send it off somewhere else and trade an animal of equal weight and bring it back they would do that. Because I'd really, the animals that I have, I love them. They're so fun. Like the turkeys, they follow you around. They're so inquisitive. You got a line of turkeys. They're big birds. Ours are about 15 pounds each now. They follow you around, and I can't do it to them, but I could trade somebody else who can do it.
Right.
And trade it back. That's a little secret too. If you think, I could never kill, I couldn't do that in Harvest Moon. I can't either. That's why you would trade for them. But another thing, you need to know where your farmers are. So you mentioned, the reason I was saying is calf is I was trying to think about a cow, a heifer, whatever you got out there. Who knows their ranchers around? And could you buy half a carcass or a quarter carcass? Because that's a lot of meat. To put 1,000 pounds or even 800 or 500 pounds of meat in the fridge is a lot. But like, let's say the 3 of us got together here and we said, well, why don't we go get a Holstein somewhere, and things 900 pounds. By the time they rack it out and save the bones for the dogs and things, we'll get, 300 pound of meat each. And then we know the farmer that does that. We know where the feed comes from. We know what kind of fields they're on. We know how those farmers treat the animals, and we keep the money locally for our own people around our own local communities to keep that economy going.
Right.
That's smart, and it's going to be critical in the coming years. I honestly think that we're on the verge of some type of black swan event. If we look at kind of the social and political chaos that's going on right now, we can see that the radicals, they need a distraction from everything that's going on with the failing economy that is just being manipulated day in and day out with false numbers from the Federal Reserve. And so they need a major distraction to really take back control of the media, take back control of the information and narrative, shut things down for a while, and get everybody under control. Now we're seeing the rising again of this new COVID variant. There's a few different ones that are coming about, and the talk of various restrictions coming back. And so we can see potentially the platform for a new black swan event or event coming about, which is going to try to ring us back up into this fear mentality. But, at the end of the day is if you're doing what David and Jim are talking about here, if you're self-sufficient, if you are on a homestead and you got chickens, you got goats, you got cows, you're growing your own, and you have a way to defend yourself. You have networks of trade and barter. You have relationships with the farmers. You have relationships with the homeopathic doctors in your neighborhood. You have good sources of herbs and vitamins and good sources of medications. And you've established this over the last few years, then you're not the one that really has to worry too much about what's coming, but instead you're going to be the one that people are going to be coming to for answers. And so, David, what are your thoughts on what we could potentially see coming here? Because we know that everything is ramping up faster and faster every week.
Well, what you mentioned there also, but the fact checker, disinformation, new laws have rolled out across the planet. So I find it really interesting that we're coming into this time. I talk about electromagnetic changes on the sun that affect the jet streams in the cloud cells and our ability to plant and harvest at certain dates, which have been established since those 1880s or whatever. We have a good 150 years of you plant this date, you harvest this date. Pretty much if you get in the ground by then when it's warm enough, you're going to get a crop. But this is getting thrown out of kilter. Now they're going to try to blame it and say CO2, but really it's a lot of electromagnetism from the sun. Why did all the ancient cultures worship the sun so much? Because it was the life giver, and they understood it too, that when that changed in its output, frequency, color, heat, radiation, then something on Earth happened also. But for me to talk about that, that's now disinformation, because what they've established is something like this, just in a sort of a easy way to explain it. If an authoritarian body or group like the United Nations IPCC, they are the number one on the block that gets to point down from on high and say, nope, we are the established fact, truth, from all the scientists across the world, we are the ones that can determine to tell Google to delist your site.
We are the world. Oh, sorry.
Ministry of Truth. Huh. It's George
But we
Orwell,
need to talk about
1984.
these things moving forward. But this is so, it comes in right at this second. Like, that's not just a percentage chance.
Mhm.
That is fill in the blank.
Wow.
Well,
Okay, so now that I'm going to go dig a hole and live in it,
I'll join you.
like,
Maybe
well,
got food.
we can do better than this. So, and I think, and obviously, how you said earlier that we, a lot of us that are even having the conversation are going to be miles ahead of anybody else, because there's going to be this is why I wanted to be outside of where I'm at. I'm in Wichita, Kansas, and I was thinking about, I wanted to get at least an hour outside of town, because that's a 3-day walk for most people. And I know that 3 days, that's 60 miles. And a lot of people can do about 20 miles in a day if they're desperate. But the problem is that those within the city are going to, it turns into, let me give you this. This is where it turns into the Rat King. And if anybody understands you guys know the story about the Rat King? Have you heard this
I
yet?
don't. Please tell me.
Oh.
Okay, so the Rat King is basically, they dug a pit and they put 10 mice in there and rats in there, and they left them, and they came back. Eventually, there was only one, and then they put 9 more rats in there, and then eventually there was one, and then they did it again. They put 9 more rats in there, and eventually there was one, because they were having a mouse problem with their barn or their whatever it was, or their town. They did this honing down of this, where in the cities, people are going to see cycles of people dying off, and the only ones that are going to be left are the cannibals that are willing to do anything it takes to live, which means kill you or whatever it takes, because you mean nothing to them but meat or a source of nutrition. And the sad part of it is that that's what the cities will be like. These big conglomerate, these huge, like New York's and stuff, and Philadelphia's, where they have no natural resources whatsoever, they will start feeding on themselves, and then eventually you only have the worst left who survived, who will then head to suburbia. And that is really a real concern. If things do break down far enough, the Rat King scenario really can be a thing that will be, but it'll be based in humanity. So I didn't mean to scare you more.
No, could I jump in there for a second?
go ahead, do it.
Good.
Yeah, so if those population decline in the city, you think there'd be a lot of natural vegetation that would start growing around in all these parks, and different kind of fruits and things, and natural wild forageables, where at some point there's going to be this balance of lost population in the city versus where it really starts growing in the cracks in the sidewalks again, and who knows what'll be there. Dandelions, lamb's quarter. You never know.
Right.
And they're not leaving the cities to come way out into the countryside to start looking for sustenance. They have found their food source. They're going to defend it. They're going to be in the cities. They're going to stay there. They're not going to. And imagine at that point, you're talking about a year after.
Right.
At that point, even having petrol would be, like a Mad Maxy kind of thing. It'd be difficult to find.
Yeah.
So they're not going to be traveling 60, 100 miles out to the countryside.
Well,
See, at that point, there's going to be a firewall literally on the human physiology, or how far it can walk or carry something or push or whatever. There'll still be bicycles and things, but
but nobody knows how to ride a bike anymore, so that's fine. And if you just put a kickstand on it, they definitely won't.
I'm not going to have a flying car that works off of solar?
Yes, you will in your dreams. Anyway, there's a lot of cool stuff. I think that I really am understanding there's going to be a huge transition, and what the landing looks like is going to be determined on us. So like us having this conversation, and us having others that, like continuing to say, hey, listen, here's where they're going. Here's where we don't want to go. If we push hard enough, we can change the trajectory of this plane crash, and we can try to soften the landing that fits best for us, not for them. But if we put no effort into it, we can't be disappointed how it looks when we finally crash into the ground. This is the sad part of this, is that our effort really does mean a lot. And people don't realize, even though we seem broke, as a collective, we hold more wealth than they do by 2 or 3 times still. If we just quit fighting with each other and bickering with each other over stupid things, and we stand up and say, hey, no more glyphosates in my food, no more spray in the atmosphere. Let's just work on what God gives us here, and we'll work it out later. And we can actually have that conversation. But if we never try to have pushback on this at all, we're never going to have a spot at the table. We have to start somewhere.
Yeah, pioneering lifestyle. Again, that would be the first spot at the table, is to, like, we all agree pioneering lifestyle is where the conversation starts.
1880s, right? That's that.
Yeah.
I always think of the 1880s as kind of
Full circle, huh? Kind of
right
going full
before we
circle. The
became like
establishment of America.
industrialized and the chemicals came in. We really got into the chemical industry after the petros came out, but really 1880s was that sweet spot, I think, for a lot of things, because we had some medicine. You know, there was some things we were doing right. We weren't getting it perfect, but we were doing pretty good. You know, could still die of cholera on the Oregon Trail, you know, that kind of stuff. Anyway, that was a joke, guys. That was funny.
I laughed.
So,
Well,
yeah.
so let me ask you this, because we're coming up to this kind of this apex, this precipice moment, where there's enough people that are waking up, and whether alone we can agree that they're on the same page, because I disagree that they are on the same page. Most people are either some extreme conspiracy theory over here or some extreme conspiracy theory over here, or they're just, you know, there's people who are very rational or just sitting in that middle line. But we have people that are waking up and understanding that there is an attack happening right now on humanity, that there's a depopulation of the planet ongoing, that there's a formulation to bring humanity into centralized geographic areas and restart the social, the economic, and the political infrastructure into a global dynamic. And most people are against this. They don't want this. We know that this undermines our freedoms, our liberties, and people are starting to step up and rise against us. What I do understand is that if the people do stand up and step up against us, that these people will scorch the earth before they ever give up power. They will get rid of every single human on this planet before they ever give up power, because that's just how sick and demented these people really are. Right. So that means that there's only a few various scenarios that can really come about. Number one is they succeed, and I don't see that happening with the amount of people that are already awakening, people already out there taking the steps, homesteading, people arming themselves, getting prepped and everything for what's coming. So that's not a scenario. That there's some type of compromise where we have some type of median progression into their global order, but we still keep our national sovereignty and people rise up and they basically acquiesce various different powers, but they still stay in control. I don't really want that to happen. I don't see that happening. I'm not going to acquiesce shit. But then the other aspect is that we rise up and they try to destroy us and we destroy them, and we are kicked back to the 1880s quite literally. And then we have to rely on these things that we're talking about with minor technological integrations in society, people producing their own electricity and these types of things, to where we have to build civilization back up from this. So what are your guys' thoughts on kind of the potential of what can happen before this 2030, 2040, 2050 rolls out?
Jim, go. I'll dovetail off you.
Well, I mean, again, I really do believe, Josh, that, I mean, because we are resonating or whatever you want to, creating frequency, we are talking about this. We are changing the trajectory of this crash or what it's going to look like on the other side. So again, I'm going to go back to that. I think that there's a lot of good. And I did mention this over the weekend when I was traveling. Guys, if there wasn't a good faction, if there wasn't people out there actually working hard to try to keep, the good alive in this world, we'd already be in cages and we'd already been dead or executed or in re-education camps. So understand that there's a lot of great things happening now. And because we're doing this, but this means that until the day your last breath, you have to keep fighting for freedoms, because obviously these people have been willing to do it for centuries and you're just now waking up to it. So we got to be more mindful to stand opposed. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I'll stay on your frequencies with you, because the change in the frequency in the sun is something that is terrifying to the elite, because as we roll into 2024, approximately October 23rd, 24th, there's a celestial alignment where the gas giants come into a square that hasn't been seen in this perfection of a square since 79 AD. So you got to think about the celestial energies that are running through. And if anybody knows the Vedas, or if you go into the Yugas in India, we've come out of a really heavy dark period, and it's all cyclical as well. We come to almost to a place where people can manifest with their minds, and we come back down into where we were in the 1600s, where the church ruled and they burned you at the stake. That's not divinity, in my opinion, at all. If you're going to murder another human being, that I don't want to be on that side of the thing. That's something I don't want to be on that team. If you're there burning all those people and putting them to the sword because they don't believe the same, that thanks, but no thanks. But this whole cycle of increasing energies and vibration frequency changes, you can see it in the sun. Anybody who's old enough, it went from yellow to white. Hey, that's a huge clue out there. But if you follow the different yuga cycles here, every day is vibrationally becoming lighter and lighter and faster moving energies. And we just moved out of Aquarius back in also 2020, which is interesting when the COVID came in and the complete shift of our world. And it was a Pluto-Saturn conjunction.
Yep, that we just moved out of.
Yeah. And you got to think about all these things in happenstance. And, you might say, well, that astrology is woo-woo stuff. You have to realize that astrology and astronomy were connected sciences until 200 years ago. And they purposely dissected them because astronomy shows you where you sit in the heavens, like, X, Y, Z axis, where you literally sit in the heavens related to the center of our galaxy and the spiral arms of our galaxy. But the astrology explains the repeating movements through those areas with different frequencies and changes of energies. Yeah, and that's what they didn't want you to know is we're coming back into a lighter vibrational phase. So whatever's happening, frequencies upticking and going lighter and lighter every day. So, their grasp on you is, even though it might seem like a micro fine, little bit less, hey, who knows what's going to happen in 2024? And, these energies that are sweeping through our galaxy right now. And I think that's what terrifies the elite so much.
Yeah. And I want to expand on what you're saying there, David, because we've talked about this, I think, on my show and stuff when we had this discussion. I've studied the occult for well over 2.5 decades. And one of the things that I realized is a lot of the mysteries, a lot of the symbolism is representative of very ancient cycles that were being tracked. And one of these cycles is the movement of our sun through the galaxy. And if we utilize modern physics and understand logically that there's a concentration of mass and energy, of gases and energy towards the center of the arms of the Milky Way, and we transit this as a sun going from the bottom of that arm to the top of that arm. So we transit through high density areas and go to low density areas, and then we come back down, as well as various different polarities. And right now, kind of marked where we are, is we transited into that area where we're moving out of winter and into spring. And so if we look at that, we're coming to this point of equinox towards the galactic center of that arm. And what that does is it increases the cosmic radiation bombardment that comes into our solar system. And much of what we were saying, solar maximums and solar minimums. At solar maximum, the solar energy is pushing the cosmic radiation outward. And then during solar minimum, that cosmic radiation is coming in, bombarding the planets. And that has profound effects on life and DNA. There's quite a few different studies, 2013, 2014, Dr. Martin Blank, talked about this one, where the various different cosmic radiation frequencies have an effect on the evolution of your DNA. And your DNA is an electromagnetic transducer that sends and receives signals and understands when these cycles are coming about. Going into kind of what you're talking about astrology, I just had Laura Lee on my show a few different times, and she's a great astrologer out there, does a lot of stuff on the hero's journey and the Lord of the Rings. And she talks about this, and I kind of had to define astrology in my own kind of way. And astrology is the grand archetype. And the grand archetype means that there's various subtle energy patterns that are moving around us. And as those things inch their way through the cosmic landscape, those fluctuations of subtle energy affect the subtle energy within us, within humanity, within our own bodies personally. And this is kind of why we take astrology and we look at the movement of the heavens as having such a profound effect on our psyche, on our attitude, and on our behaviors and so forth. And this means that objects that are closer to us are going to have more of a profound of a subtle energy effect within their movements. This is why we have the moon and, people called lunatics and the whole mythology behind the moon. Right. And so what I've gained to understand from this is that as we move through that galaxy, the propensity of those energies also increases. And one thing I'll put out there, I haven't put this out there in a show yet, is how many people out there have noticed that they feel their heart, they feel other people so much more now. And really what I've come to realize is this, that we're all becoming empaths in a sense. And I don't like that word necessarily, but we're all becoming empaths in a sense. And really what that is these skills, I guess, these senses that are being redeveloped within us that are coming back to their nature. And this is one thing that scares the living shit out of the globalists. This is why they had the vaccine that attacks the ACE2 receptor that downregulates the VMAT2 gene, which basically brings you closer to God and brings spiritual and psychic experiences. because they understood that we're moving into this new cycle that's going to awaken dormant abilities within inside of us, and that scares the living shit out of them because we become the creators of our own reality during those points in times.
Well, could I jump in with the cosmic ray
Yeah.
to continue on that thought? Okay, you're looking further out of field, from the geocentric view or the heliocentric view, further outside our solar system. But if you think local, just on our planet right here, the decrease in magnetic field and the increasing galactic cosmic rays, what does that do for physical effects on our planet? It increases cloud cover greatly. So when we're coming into a 400-year low, or actually a 2,000 year, somewhere in that, between a 400 and a 2,000 year low in solar activity, the cosmic rays are going to increase incredibly. But they found through, going back, say, 2 or 3 million years of looking at different proxies for, rainfall and also temperature, that something flips us into an ice age. And it's that galactic cosmic ray increase that allows, at least for some time, a huge amount of natural cloud cover to cool temperatures on the planet naturally. So, and you can see that with solar maximum and solar minimum as well, the amount of floods during that time. There's established sciences up the yin yang looking at the amount of debris and the size of the debris that comes down in streams based on floods and how deep those floods were. And they're drilling into alpine lakes and those drilling cores to see, what kind of pollens there were, or again, what types of size of debris flowed in based on we're in the ice age, we're not, we're in the interglacial, we're not, we're at a solar maximum, we're not, in those iterations. If you go back through like the last 12,000 years of climate on the planet, there's 5 very discernible, like massive drop-offs in temperature. So one of them occurred around 8,100 years prior. It's called the 8.1 K. Some people like to say 8.2 because it's around 81 or 8150 years ago. They dropped about 4 degrees Celsius on the planet on an average basis. So whatever had emerged out of the Younger Dryas, like that, you had the cometary impact on the ice sheet, which Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson referenced quite a bit, and they showed the Badlands and all the scarring and that sort of from the massive floods. That's why all the big animals are over in Africa, because when it hit on the ice sheet in Canada, on the other side of the planet at the very bottom, those animals were protected, the megafauna. So, these changes are so gigantic that we've seen in the past. So for the global warming narrative to come in and say, oh, it's this, that, or the other, the cosmic rays is one. The reason I bring that up is because this whole global warming debate, they never talk about cosmic rays and the cloud cover and the solar activity, because if they did, you would realize it's all tied together and they can't tax that.
What a useful idiot we are. Hey, David, real quick. You said the sun has gone from yellow to white. And I always thought of the idea that we rushed to white lights, or bright white lights, only because it gave us better color. But in reality, we were just mimicking the sun. So the original light bulbs mimic the sun in yellow or soft white, when now we've all pushed to the bright white is what we're used to, correct? Would that be a correct analogy?
That'd be a good analogy. Now we move to LED. So what does that tell you?
That we're in a matrix. It's not real.
Yeah, they're going to the blue light next, which is interesting because John Casey's book, who I consider the #1 expert in the entire planet about this grand solar minimum, the effects, but on his book, the cover is blue. It's a blue sun. The original printing publication was called Cold Sun, COLDSUN. That's John Casey. And he was the lead investigator. Remember where the shuttle went up and exploded? He was the lead investigator for NASA for that. The lead investigator to investigate the shuttle explosion. But when he started talking about cycles, he lost his esteemed career at NASA. But Cold Sun, look at that. He turned it blue because you can look at different angstroms and wavelengths when you're looking at the sun. It doesn't always have to be the color. You can dissect it down. You can look at magnetism. You can look at different irradiance signatures. You can look at different, is it iron isotopes or chromium isotopes coming out there? You can look at the sun in a lot of different ways. Even publicly now, there's still a lot of information out there. But it was so interesting that he chose blue as the color for the cover of his book this is 15 years ago, called Cold Sun. And then Jimmy Revenson, we went from yellow to bright white. We're going into LED, which is basically a blue light frequency. That's why they have blue blocker glasses. And it swings back to his whole book cover of being a blue sun on there. So thought I'd tie that in.
Yeah, that's good.
And explain a little bit more about that transition to the white light and how that happened and what is happening. Is that part of a cycle?
Well, you mean on the sun or the society? Because I mean that we that's why a lot of older people prefer the soft whites, because that's 90% of the, or 100% of their entire life. That's all they ever knew.
Right.
But then those people that work outside and they come in, it's like, this light doesn't work for
Well, it
me.
reminds me of an Outer Limits episode I saw. If you remember the competing show with the Twilight Zone, there's an Outer Limits episode where there was this music that started getting picked up on the planet and played into people's headphones, and everybody was listening to it, and it was like euphoric, and people became addicted to it. And they tried to stop it because people started transforming. They started growing new cells and skin cells, and they started becoming metallic. And they could get the adults off of it, but the kids could not get away from the addiction. The younger you were, the higher the addictive rate it was. And what ends up happening is these kids completely biologically transform into what looks like an alien being. And all of a sudden they get a message, they decipher the message, and the aliens were telling them that their sun was about to shift wavelengths and become harmful to all the people on the planet. And they had sent a gift to help them. And they genetically modified the kids to basically be adapted to the sun. Then the sun shifts to UV radiation, and all the adults have to stay inside, and all the kids now have this new genetic mutation. So it kind of like rings that type of tone when we start talking about this.
That's factual, because we can do it to tomato plants with rock music and classic music. We can do it to beans and all this other stuff. Why couldn't we, obviously, with frequency, change ourselves? I mean, that right.
Well, that's my question for David is that as the sun progresses through this ocean of galactic energy, as these various densities begin to increase or decrease, does that actually begin to change the wavelength, the energy output of the sun? I know the answer, but it would be great if you could explain a little bit of that for the audience out there.
You have to almost scrape aside everything that you believe. And, Jim, you're so true. Like the base frequency is sound that makes everything else vibrate to have the frequency for the vibration. So it all comes down to the sound. Even the Bible talks about the breath of life having the sounds make creation.
Yeah.
So there's something in that. And
well, that goes back to the brass bells and the resonance frequency geometry in all the churches that used to create frequency and healing throughout the countryside, but they put stained glass stories in it and took all the brass bells because they need them for war. I mean, I think there's more to that than we really want to pay attention. It sounds too easy, but in reality, how easy was it that we actually had all these quote unquote temples or these occult centers, which is no different than saying that the guys that were giving you herbs were snake oil dealers. But in reality, these frequencies, these occult areas where we'd have these brass bells that were tuned to a frequency, how can we imagine that does not create healing in us when we know that it does?
See, that's the thing that they've tried to, and I want to say them, I'm talking about the universities, these purveyors and controllers of history, Smithsonian being one. Yeah. But at the very top of that, it's always the same. These moneyed families for 4,000, 5,000 years, the central banking formations, this type of religious institutions that have been holding, power for 2,000 to 4,000 years, something like that, the same top level of control. And you have to ask yourself, why has it been here so long and completely always in the same hands for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years? That's not an accident.
Right.
But what they've taught us in schools is what? There's no electric universe. Nothing vibrates. There's no Brooklyn currents out there forming stars on electrical lines. And that's why I was trying to answer the question. Well,
yeah,
if we're into a frequency change and we're actually passing through like a high voltage area or a dense area of space, the whole solar system is going to behave differently. And you saw that, the newest, talking about Uranus, and also Pluto's atmosphere collapsed in 2020. Speaking of Uranus, the atmosphere and at least the top, the dark storm reversed and ripped itself apart. So you had at least the northern hemisphere of Uranus in also 2020 reverse itself.
So then getting ready to reverse our poles as well. or are on the way of that?
Well, it's polar wandering, as they say right now, but I cannot believe that those are unrelated, that we're coming into a area of space with a faster frequency that's been defined by every single culture in the past with prophecies for the future, that we're somehow supposed to believe that there's no frequency, no vibration. The earth is just a thing that floats around the sun. It never changes. And if it does change, it's because of you or me doing something like driving a car on the planet. It makes zero sense to just coming from a logical perspective here, looking back through 5,000 years of human history. We're the bizarro ones right now that aren't looking at the past, understanding these changes that come in on cyclical patterns. And I do believe, to answer the question in a long way, that we're coming through a current in space. Think about a high voltage current above your heads. They're on the high tension towers. They're all in a single line. Well, there's something like that. It's called a Birkeland current. B-I-K-E. B-I-R-K-E-L-A-N-D, Birkeland current. And those are in space, but they don't have insulation around them. So they're rather loose plasma ropes that have current through them from the center of our galaxy. Now, there's different intensities, and stars form along these. They call them pearl strings of pearls, whatever you like to call that. And when this voltage changes, or this electrical frequency changes, of course, that's coming into our star. And our star is going to respond to that frequency and voltage change to it. And that will affect our planet, because our magnetic fields are 100% intertwined. There's no way that the Earth can't be intertwined with the sun's magnetic field. We're the third star from it. And still, way out at Uranus, they're having atmospheres reverse and, very clean signals of solar maximum, solar minimum, cloud cover increasing, brightness increasing based on what our sun is doing. Yeah. We're 36 times closer.
Right.
Well, that's going to happen to us.
Isn't it the idea that the sun is going through a different environment, so it's going to burn differently?
Yes.
No different than if it was propane or fire. Wood fire, whatever. Each environment changes how it burns, right? So,
well, you got to get rid of the idea of the nuclear fission sun as well, because
we'd
be talking about a cold cathode sun in this perspective being affected
on
by
the Birkeland
currents. Right. So you see an ice age coming.
No, I was just responding. On a cold cathode, you'd be seeing an ice age. On an excited cathode, like they did, what was that, in the star in the jar, you would see something glowing, and you'd see plasma dots starting to morph around and go at higher speed based on the current input increases, which would equate to a warmer environment, more food production on our planet, which we've seen through the past as well. That's unexplainable 8,000 years ago when temperatures were warmer. Minoan warming period, Roman warming period, 8,000 years before the 8.1 K, rapid, incredible drop off in temperatures, as rapid almost as the Younger Dryas itself. Temperatures were far warmer than even the Roman warming period, a good 1 degree Celsius warmer than that. So.
Well, I know there's been talk in the bee community, which I am a beekeeper, but everybody's saying that the honey is really staying in the lower boxes this year. So if you know anybody who's making honey, talk to them and find out what the bees are doing for the winter, because it might be real important for you to know that there might be a harsh winter coming up where they don't feel like they're going to make it unless they store more. So the bees are telling us something as well right now, that there's something going on in the world around us.
Yeah, could I throw the Farmer's Almanac also talks about a rough winter coming, but I want to do one of those nature things here, because the old timers down here in the valleys that are around, they say the more days of fog there are in July and August, it will depend, and then how many days of fog you get in the morning, foggy mornings, determines how intense the winter will be. Well, we were getting fog in June.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I just drove across the country from New York to Minnesota, and I hit fog in every state on my way here, and I've been seeing fog everywhere around Minnesota since around early July. So absolutely, we are in biblical times, I guess, if you want to look at it like that.
Well, those two tell the same story. The bee guys are telling me, and the bee boards, I guess, I don't know what you call them or whatever. We talk to each other, but anyway, they're saying that they're not getting as much top honey as possible that they usually do. It's not been a bad or dry summer like we had last year. Last year, they put out a lot of honey and didn't keep much back, but then this year, that's the exact opposite. So,
Well, there's more moisture in the atmosphere from that Hunga Tonga eruption last year as well. So
right.
you're seeing increased humidity, more record rainfalls, a lot of increased cloud cover, just atmospheric rivers from the sky pouring down. Here we had, what do we have? 6.2 inches of rain in 3.5 hours here.
Wow.
Now that was a record that broke all the records back to 1888. And my barn flooded about 1.5 feet, maybe a little more deep when I went out. It was shit. We ended up, so this whole last week I've been knowing there was more rain coming from the hurricane, and I was just, a neighbor and myself, been digging just trenches around the barn. Like if the first trench gets full and it flows, we got these extra trenches. Because he's like, no, you only need one. Doesn't rain that much. I'm like, dude, it's really going to increase in intensity. So whatever you think's enough, 3x would probably be where you want to go. So if your R factor, you think, oh, I only might need this R factor in my place, you're going to at least want to double that for what's coming. Mm-hmm. Just on a standard basis. This year I really believe is a rollover year. But Jimmy, yeah, that's crazy with the bees, man. They're going to stack it deep like that. They need that food, don't they? They know it's. See, bees are really interesting too because they understand a lot of magnetic changes on the planet.
Yeah. Well, they resonate with the frequency around them. The whole science behind breathing bee air is talking about healing the lungs and toxicity in the body. But the idea that they're putting everything down for next year, and they really did nothing above what they call the queen screen, which is the top bonus boxes and where you get your honey from. So there's no brood in there, so you don't kill any of the next generation off, so you're only getting straight honey. Yeah, there's a lot less. And I've noticed that mine didn't really do, they weren't really trying to go extra. They're just really concentrating on their structures that they have in their main boxes. So I'm watching it too. Anyway.
So we're over time, but I'm going to keep on going for a little while because, this is an interesting conversation. And there's a question I want to propose here and ask because this is something that I've talked about before in the past, but with knowing that we're going through these various different cyclic changes and that things are probably going to get very, very bad in the sense of weather on this planet moving forth as we go into this higher energy structure within the galactic cycle. And we're going to have massive changes here on the planet, especially with extreme weather, so on and so forth. Then how do we perceive the globalists who are trying to potentially depopulate the world, concentralize human population into these cities, and then leave nature off limits? It almost is like that they understand what's happened, which we know that they do, but what they're trying to do is actually kind of in a sick, demented way is save humanity by basically trying to get them in these areas, these centralized 15-minute cities, and trying to not change too much of their way of life, but also get rid of as much of the population that becomes useless in a sense, as their words would say. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. What are your guys' thoughts on that? That these globalists are really been preparing us this whole time for this?
Well, they can't kill all of us, and they only want the best of us to survive. So we are the ones that are going to react. So survival of the fittest, in a lot of ways, we win the lab rat race, or yeah. I don't know. Maybe is that right? Yeah, I get it, Josh. That makes sense. But are we preparing ourselves, like David said earlier, because we prepared ourselves at all. We're millions of miles ahead of everybody else. So that means that we will be the next to perpetuate everything here. We better do a good job. That's a lot of responsibility. That's the way it's going to go.
Well, I'm looking at it as keeping compliant breeding stock for the next 80% that they need in the cities. And those that are outside, I think it's a test also. Yeah, because I keep reading these things, they put humanity to the test in the worst of situations, and the survivors out of these things are the ones that are going to perpetuate, like a certain percentage of the population moving through. Because you have to realize no matter what you do, there's always going to be a percentage that will always behave or come out. They've stratified humanity. That there's always going to be 1% that will never believe anything that's ever given, sold, sent across the news waves, papers, whatever. There's always going to be at least 1% that never believes anything. So you're just going to have to put that into like the working equation. 1% this. There's always going to be 10% that get it, and there's always going to be that 80% that we can always count on for the compliant breeding stock moving forward. So they don't need 80% of the world's population. All they need is breeding stock. Because you got to think about having chickens. I don't need 1,000 chickens at the end of the year if I have a bunch of eggs and I have some sort of incubator. I can bring up an entirely new flock from the last one. As long as I have a rooster and a couple egg-laying hens, I can continue to breed and breed and breed again. And by the end of the winter, I could have another 1,000 birds. But the ones that are super smart and the ones that lay the biggest eggs and the ones that you notice when you're around in the coop all the time, the ones that might be up in the tree if there's a raccoon, just the ones that are a little more intuitive. And imagine if you had a super intuitive couple of hens that laid super giant eggs like yours, Jim. Mm-hmm. And then those are the ones that you wanted to pick as the breeding stock and bring the rooster in, and then you can put it together. That's exactly what's happening. There's nothing different than keeping people in the cities moving forward. Yeah, you might think like, oh, they're trying to help us. They're giving us food. No, they're not.
It's what we did in dogs, right? We bred dogs for certain things and this and that. We can breed chickens to be bigger and turkeys to be bigger if we do that. So yeah, it's a bit of a Darwin effect, I would believe.
So, but we can all agree that these people, these elites, they understand exactly what's happening. They understand these cycles, and they are getting themselves prepared and keeping the fresh stock of humanity ready to repopulate the world under their own control after everything's said and done.